Hi, my name is Justin Bramlett, and this is my ad assignment. So the general topic that I want to talk about today is the framing effect and how it dictates our decisions in day-to-day life. What the framing effect is, it's when people give different answers to the same problem depending on how that problem is phrased. The basics of the article, my title, the framing of decisions in psychology of choice, the authors Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, and that is my reference for the article. The introduction I want to give before I talk about this article is basically what exactly will reverse the perception of a person. In other words, how much would I have to change the wording of a question to make someone rethink their answer? Fairly straightforward. The hypothesis that's stated inside the article is the psychological principles that govern the perception of decision problems in the evaluation of probabilities and outcomes produce predictable shifts of preference when the same problem is framed in different ways. So if I frame a question a different way or a problem in a different way, it's going to they say it's going to shift the preference or the preference of said person. The method they used is pretty easy. They use questions pertaining to saving lives and money because both are extremely important. But I want to focus on one question or choices they gave, because they had like 7 or 8 and it would just take too long to show them all in this PowerPoint. So I focused on one that I think is the best, in my opinion. So they took one group of people and they said 600 people will die. You can either 1, save 200 people, or you can choose number 2 and 1/3 probability. There's a 1/3 probability people will be saved, and there's a 2/3 probability that no one will be saved, which it's kind of obvious. I mean, I would pick number 1 because it's a more for sure thing. But so they pushed those people away and brought a whole new group of people in. And they asked them the exact same question but phrased differently. 600 people will die. You can either let 400 people die or 200 people live, or there's a 1/3 probability no one dies or people will be saved, and there's a 2/3 probability 600 people die or no one will be saved. And it's obvious that these 4 choices, these 2 questions are exactly the same, just phrased differently. And each question or each experiment they did doing this is exactly the same. They gave them a pair of choices involving gains and a pair of choices involving losses. Alright, so the results of that said experiment. 72% of people chose number 1, like me, save 200 people, and only 28% chose number 2, 1/3 probability everyone lives, 2/3 probability no one lives, which is obvious. I mean, I did that. So people wanted to go with the sure way instead of the risky way, but more rewarding in the end if it paid off. The second set of problems is different, but only phrased differently, but people chose differently. The perceptions were switched. Only 22% of people went with choice 1, 400 people dying, but 200 people living. And 78% went with choice 2, which is 1/3 probability no one dies, 2/3 probability everybody dies. Exactly the same as above, just worded more negatively. The conclusion that came up was that most participants will pick the most risk-averse answer when given choices of gains. But when given a choice of losses, most people will pick the most risk-taking answer. This proves the hypothesis, stating that if a question is worded or framed just slightly different, showing losses instead of gains, or anything just worded slightly different, like at all, people will drastically change their answer. So, description of my ad. The ad shows the old Verizon guy who used to say, "Can you hear me now?" But now he's working for Sprint. He starts talking about how Sprint is now within 1% of Verizon, and he goes on to say that Sprint will save you 50% on most of the phones. So, I don't think my link is going to work. I actually have it right here. So, yeah, there it is. I do not have the ad, but that is the link. That's the link. The analysis of my ad. The ad uses positive language in order to put a positive frame on the product that they're going to sell. This is a classic framing effect. While it's not the exact same as the study, it showed a study I showed in the previous slide. The basis of the framing a study or situation to sound more positive is still there. So basically, no, it doesn't say all this, like doesn't give like two answer choices and all that, but it does show that when you frame a thing in a positive light, people are more willing to choose it. I mean, even I was more willing to go for Sprint after that, after the ad. So how would I change the ad in my test to test my analysis? Well, it's rather simple. First, I would keep the original ad where Paul, the Verizon guy, says they're within 1% of the Verizon and says 50% on other phone companies. Then he could switch the words around a little bit and say the Verizon is 1% better and you may save 50% by switching to other networks. This puts everything in a more native light, and I think with the framing effect will make people less likely to pick it because it's no longer sounding like Sprint is better. It's sounding that Verizon is just a little bit better. So people who are trying to switch Verizon to Sprint aren't, because Verizon's just 1% better. And in my mind, I think that's a framing effect. And that is my ad analysis, and that's my PowerPoint.